Nearly 2 months ago, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee approved using military force in Syria to respond to alleged chemical weapons use. It was a close vote in the committee, 10 senators supporting using force, 7 senators against. But ultimately, U.S. military strikes were averted after the Russians stepped in and negotiated a deal approved by the Assad government in Syria and the UN Security Council to turn over chemical weapons to the international body for destruction. War was averted. Well, today, that same Senate Foreign Relations Committee met again to be updated on the situation in Syria. Now, this hearing comes just as the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons announced that Syria will meet the imposed November 1st deadline to have all chemical weapon production and mixing facilities destroyed. Now, given the progress made over the intervening months using diplomacy instead of committee-approved military strikes, some senators question the ability of the U.S. military to solve problems around the world. Here were Senators Ed Markey and Tim Kaine, both Democrats.
We have to approach all of this with a lot of humility, given what we've learned after we intervened in Iraq, in Libya, in Afghanistan, after what we've seen go on in Egypt. So we should just have a little humility in the United States in terms of our ability to control events on the ground in these countries.
There's a fatigue that the American public are feeling now about the limits of our efforts in this part of the world. As Senator Markey mentioned, the kind of we've had hubris and now we ought to have humility about the effects of our outcomes.
Ultimately, though, disarming Syria of chemical weapons is just one issue. The other is the civil war that has claimed the lives of more than 100,000 people and created a humanitarian crisis while raging for more than 2 years. With another round of talks in Geneva slated for next month, the American ambassador to Syria, Robert Ford, argued that the U.S. must continue its support to the Syrian opposition to strengthen their hand heading into negotiations where the U.S. and the opposition will demand Assad step down from power. But ultimately, this is a problem that needs to be solved by Syrians, not by U.S. missiles.
Ultimately, Senator, Syrians must fix this problem, and ultimately, Senator, it's going to require them to sit down at a table. The sooner they start, the better. But in the meantime, we will keep helping the opposition, Senator.
In response, Senators Bob Corker and John McCain, one of the fiercest war hawks in the Senate, expressed regret that the U.S. hasn't done more militarily to help the opposition.
I think our help to the opposition has been an embarrassment. And I find it appalling that you would sit here and act as if we're doing the things we said we would do.
I'm now at a position, tragically, where I now will have to rely on the Saudis to provide them with the weapons that they need, because it is patently obvious that the United States of America is not going to do so.
So there's still a lot of varying opinions on this Senate Foreign Relations Committee. But for now, most senators seem ready to let diplomacy keep working, which is a big change from just 2 months ago, when these same senators stepped to the precipice of war. On Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., Sam Sachs, RT.